And we have here most of the artists, except for one who couldn't join us today. That's Mindy Weisel. She's in Israel. She was hoping to be able to travel and come here, but she couldn't. And I'm going to try to find a spot for myself and separate the two male artists a little bit here. But again, unless Jack Rasmussen, if he's somewhere around, I would like to invite him to come and say hello. And the main reason is, of course, he's the director of the American University Museum at the Cats and Arts Center, but also I wish to thank him on behalf of all of these artists for organizing this exhibition and making sure that this project is brought to fruition. Thank you, Jack.
I beg to differ, but you organized the exhibition. You came here and you sold it to me, and you turned it into really a fantastic show.
Well, before I sit down, since I can see most of you when I'm standing, again, we are all pleasantly surprised by the interest that this exhibition provoked in the audience, and we appreciate the fact that you took time from your busy schedules to come here in the middle of the week. And I do hope that some of you will be able to return on Saturday for the official opening and the receptions. There are 7 shows in total opening this season. As you know, this exhibition will be on view until May 19th. So there is plenty of time for you to come back with friends or by yourselves and look at it. And I certainly feel that seeing this exhibition without too many people will be a very different experience, an extremely rewarding experience. So, since I'm standing, I might as well say that I was asked to curate this show by several artists who are seated here, who have taken part in an earlier iteration of this exhibition that happened a couple of years ago at Howard County Community College. The original curators and people who organized that exhibition are here with us. If you would like to stand up for a moment, please, Trudy and Weisel. And that exhibition was very successful. There were a number of artists who you see here who were included in it, but then we added several others. What connects all of these artists is that they're second-generation survivors. In some cases, you could even argue first-generation survivors. And of course, I don't need to go into detail about how being a first-generation or second-generation survivor affects the way you think, the way you look at the world, the way you create your work, and how important is the role of memory in the work that you do throughout your life. And what I wanted also to add is that this is not memory in the sense that we must remember. It is not just a conscious act of remembering, it is also involuntary memory. It is something that is part of your identity as a human being, what you grew up with, irrespective of how those memories were handed down within your family. So, I'm not a Jewish person, but I come from an area of Europe where all of the Jewish people also perished or were killed. We can use any number of words to describe what happened in World War II. Genocide is an appropriate term in that context. In that context, yes, indeed. And what I wanted to say is that as a person growing up in former Yugoslavia, in the country that now is called North Macedonia, I cannot help but tell you how many times I passed by the place where the Jewish people were held in 1943 before they were sent to Treblinka. Not a single one came back. That was a big old factory, it still stands there. Every time I pass by, I have to think about it. And when I was growing up, I also remember that my mother lived in the former Jewish quarter. Because after all the Jews disappeared, other people settled. So I have grown up thinking about this issue of memory and people who disappeared or almost disappeared from Europe for many, many years of my own life. So for me it was an honor, a privilege, but also a big responsibility to curate a show like this. And that's why I'm very happy that we managed to pull it together. And even though some might say that this is a paradoxical moment for this exhibition, I think it's also a very necessary exhibition at this very moment. So instead of talking more about all of this, I would like to invite each artist to perhaps say something about how has this question of memory affected them, or how is this memory reflected in the works that you see here. And I don't want to ask anybody specific, so I'm asking for a volunteer.
Thank you. My name is Coos, Hamburger. I'm one of the two photographers. Michael's the other photographer. My work is in the back. I would be remiss if I didn't say, Aneta, thank you for your sensibility, your sensitivity, your patience, and your vision to help us have a vehicle to share our memories and to show something we feel inside from what we have gotten as a conduit from our parents. It's interesting. Today is the first day I see the exhibit, and as I walk through the different pieces, the different artists' work, it all resonates. You know, it's a language that we share, that we speak. I look at these pictures, and I look at these images, and I look at these sculptures, and it just makes sense to me. And that is memory. It's a memory that we have, that we didn't create, we inherited. So like I said, second generation, we're a conduit. Very quickly, because I know we're short of time. My mother was 9 years old when the Nazis occupied Amsterdam. She and her parents, my grandmother and grandfather, I never knew my grandfather, they went into hiding. They went to a bookstore that was just a couple of blocks away from their home. When they were in hiding above, in the attic above the bookstore, my mother was 500 meters from the Concertgebouw, which is the great concert, one of the great concert halls of Europe. And 750 meters in front of the window where she could see was the Rijksmuseum, which housed the most important works, some of the most important works of humanity's artwork. And yet the moat of Nazism and of depravity and of cruelty kept her locked up, that she couldn't go to any of these beautiful, artistic, musical places. So my memory, when I go listen to Mendelssohn's violin concerto in the Concertgebouw, all I hear in the background is my grandmother telling my mother, be quiet, that they don't hear you. And when I walk in the Rijksmuseum and look at the glow of the Rembrandt emanating from the painting from the wall, I think to myself, such beauty, and my mother could not walk here to see it. As a second generation person, you think that way, you interpret the world in a different way. So my images are a way to make poetry from light, to try and give dignity to moments. Photographs, in the absence of AI, photographs are proof of life. They prove that a moment existed, that the people in my images existed. Because for me, the family members I never knew only existed in photographs. And that's been my driving force. Even the beautiful exhibit, horrific but beautiful exhibit that Aneta put up there of the moving images, I stopped and I looked at the films only, even now, to see if I could catch a glimpse of my family members that I hadn't seen before. It haunts as it inspires. Thank you very much for coming. I'll pass it over.
My name is Borek, and I wrote my thoughts about the demands of memory, and I will read them to make sure I don't have to rely on my memory. I will tell you two short stories about two small-town men. One was a chronicler writing a history of a Czech town during the Second World War, and the other was an old man beaten by a young boy after the war. They are long gone. I never met them, but yet I have strong memories of them. And then I will shortly talk about my dad's tattoo and my memory of it as a young boy and how I view it now. On December 21st, 1942, when the local Jews in the small town my father grew up were forced to board the train to Theresienstadt, the local Chronicle wrote, "So, the Jews are gone now. Occasionally someone mentions them. Almost all people say they didn't like them and they are not sorry that the Jews are gone. Quite the opposite." One day later he wrote, "There will be fish for Christmas. It will be assigned according to the list of registered residents. Our 2-person family will get 2 kilos of carp. You can't make up a juxtaposition like that." When researching this project, I discovered court documents from 1947 describing how my father was tried at the age of 17 for beating up an elderly man in the town when he grew up and when he returned as an orphan after the war. My father was a very gentle person and he hated violence, so it was very hard for me to imagine him beating up somebody. I found out that during an argument, this man told him, "Shut up, you dirty Jew," even though he knew my dad was both of his parents in Auschwitz and barely survived it himself. My father beat him senseless and the man sued him. After several hearings, the case was dismissed and my father was exonerated. When I read the transcript, I felt outraged, but also proud of the young boy, my dad, who desperately stood up for himself. He never told me this story, yet it is etched in my memory. My parents tried to shield me from the Holocaust memory. They hardly talk about it, and I kind of felt I shouldn't be asking. I remember as a young, confused boy, how I hated my father's tattoo on his forearm, and how I wished it would disappear, or at least for him to always wear long sleeves to cover it, and to be like other normal people. When working on this project, sometimes I wanted to give up, and I felt like that little boy again, wanting the dreaded tattoo and its demands of memory to disappear. But this tattoo existed even when covered, so I had to embrace it and recreate the story of my dad and his parents. And it is also a reminder to be grateful that I was even born, given the statistical odds of surviving Auschwitz. Thank you.
Sit. Stand up. Okay. First of all, close. Yes. Even closer. First of all, thank you. Thank you so much. Good job. I just want to start by saying, memory of a time I did not know was the name of a body of work I did a long, long time ago. And it was also the title of a poem that I had written, and it dealt with inherited memory, because that's really what I feel. I feel that I grew up hearing, in my case, my parents did speak about their experiences during the Holocaust. They had very different experiences, but they did speak. And so I heard stories, and I absorbed them, and they had a huge impact on me. And in fact, I view it, and I always say this, it's the lens through which I view the world. And through my art and my work, I actually discovered how much it has impacted on how I view the world. I didn't actually even know. So it's layer upon layer. When I think about my parents' stories, I don't know what they told me, or what I remembered, or what I read that they wrote, or what I heard them when they did their testimonies. It's all a bit of a blur, and memory, as we well know, has gaps. It's nonlinear. It is elusive. It's like trying to catch the air, and very, very difficult. So I
sort of to answer your question about how memory and what, art demands of memory, in my case, the inherited memory informs everything, from my art to my life, to my family, to everything and anything. And so much so that I was thinking about a film that I had seen a long time ago by Chantal Ackerman, but it was a farce. It was a comedy. It was called Tomorrow We Move, and I saw it as a Holocaust film, completely. So this morning I went back and I looked at reviews of the film, and they weren't all good, but nobody except one reviewer referenced anything about the Holocaust, and I thought, wow, you saw it as a Holocaust film. You, meaning me. It was the story of somebody whose father, her parents were Holocaust survivors, and the father has died, and the mother is moving into this small apartment of her daughter, who was a writer, and she brings a trunk load of stuff that belonged to the father, and the mother's a piano teacher, and in this very cramped apartment with this oversized trunk, they are hauling up a piano on the outside, and they're going to somehow get it into the apartment. And I remember thinking, it's like that. It's this congestion of and collection of memories and stories and things, and sometimes you can't even process what is and what isn't. And on top of it, that piano pulling it or being pulled up on this cable, and as you watch it, you think, is that cable going to break? Is the piano going to fall? Or is it going to get into that apartment? And that fragility of that heavy load and that cable pulling it up, even though it's a cable, it still had this fragility, felt like, yeah, of course that's a Holocaust film. What else is it? So that is the lens for me. And I find that through my work I can document family members or tell their stories, and even in my abstract work, I tear it up, I put it back together, I piece it together, I try to make whole what can't be made whole, and it is just informed by the inherited memory. Thank you.
Well, I'm actually both first generation and second generation. Closer? Okay. As I said, I am actually both first generation and second generation. I was very young by the time I became a little conscious of things, when things were changing very, very quickly. My brother was thrown out of school. He was 5 years younger than I, older than I, and I was very happy to have his companion, because all my little friends, most of my little friends from the neighborhood disappeared. So I witnessed things as a 4-year-old when part of my family, my grandmother, my aunt and uncle, my 2 cousins, very close family, were taken away. And I was told to go play. And I was a very curious little girl, wanted to know what's going on. And then I was finally told that everybody's going on a big, big trip. And so we're crying, and everybody's crying, and they're crying because they're going away for quite some time, but they're going to come back, and I wanted to go with everybody, and I was again told to go. So there was this real confusion about what is happening. And as a couple of years went by, and things became more difficult and more tense, and I was told by my mother that first we couldn't live in the main house. There were all kinds of restrictions and difficulties. But we may have to run away through the forest, but again, it's going to be, we're all going to be together, wanted to know why we have to go away. And I was told that it's because, well, you know, we're just a little bit different. I said, well, I understand. It's because I don't have yellow hair like all my friends around. And so that was my explanation of the difference. When I think about it, memory is very elusive. You sometimes want to remember what you want to remember, and sometimes as the years go by, you remember more. So finally, I was persuaded by my husband to go back. After the communists left, I had an excuse always, we're not going back because my passport, you know, I could be detained and I don't want to go yet. Finally, in 1990, there was no excuse. We went with our children.
Where?
Excuse me?
Where?
We went back to where we were hidden. And also to my home, and to be able to speak to some of the people, neighbors of my parents, and I didn't remember very much. And we did go. It was very, very interesting for me, cathartic, because I really did not remember very much. When we left, finally, I had to translate to everybody because nobody in my family spoke Slovak, and so I was translating. We had some tapes, which I can't find. We came back to a studio where I could work, and it just poured out of me. No plans to paint about the subject, no plans to think about it anymore. And my parents absolutely never wanted to talk about anything. I started asking questions when I was an adult. And they said, we live today and we look forward to the future. We are very lucky, we're together, and let's not bother about it, and it's unimportant. And it took a long time till I started to think about things. And I started to paint. This is called Hidden Memories, the large works. There are about 20 works, not all of them triptychs. Some of them are just single. And it was, I finished them in 6 months. It was poured out of me. It was the greatest catharsis of my life. And unfortunately, I really don't know many details. I know what I remember. My brother used to talk about it. He was 5 years older. And some things are lost. And it is sad. And it is sad that my parents, who were heroic people, absolutely heroic people, never complained about anything, never complained about what they lost, were grateful for every day, and taught me a great deal about life.
Thank you, Aneta, and thanks to everyone for being here. It's really an honor to be included. Thank you. I'm not used to microphone. Miriam said it so beautifully, you're so poetic. When you said memory of a time I never knew, and I think, because I feel that about my work, it's obviously not about my memory, it's about memories that somehow I have been transmitted to me in some unspoken way. And my parents also never ever, my kiddies, never spoke about the war, and I didn't ask questions in retrospect. And so only recently I started to discover a little more about what happened to them. I knew that they were born in Poland and that they had two different immigrations. They left Poland because of the persecution and they moved to Belgium. And then when Hitler invaded Belgium, they were scattered all over the world. And eventually my father made his way to England, and so did my mother separately, and they were reunited in London, where I was born. And I learned recently, one of my cousins found the ship's manifest of my father's escape from Lisbon by ship to England. And I learned more about his and some of my other family members who ended up in Cuba. I learned more about their very precarious voyages. And that, I think, was the spark that started me making these sculptures that I call night boats. And that's the large one up there, hanging from the ceiling, flying from the ceiling. They're patched together out of all kinds of strange materials. They appear fragile, but they're not. They're actually quite resilient. And to me, they express something that was silent among my parents' generation, among my family, but they express the experience of dislocation, of migration, of constantly needing to be on the move, to patch your life together out of whatever you have at hand and keep moving forward. This piece is called Passage, and so in one sense it's actually, it bridges the two parts of the museum, from one side to the other. It's also in some senses a passage from the past into the future. As Kitty was saying, my family were very much future-oriented. They never wanted to think about the past. And the other thing I would say about memory is that in the actual materials of this piece, there are memories embedded in the materials. So I used various things, a lot of things that I found, particularly in one of my grandmother's albums that I recently came to love. I'm thinking about immigration and displacement and dislocation is with us all the time because of the terrible plight of refugees all over the world. And I started to think about the importance of documents and papers. And so there's different kinds of papers. There's papers of safe passage, like visas and passports. And there's also papers of memory. So there are old photographs, particularly, as Moss mentioned, I found all these photographs of people I didn't recognize. I knew that those were the ones who didn't make it, the photographs of the people I didn't recognize. So there are photographs, postcards, basically a lot of things that carry memory and history for us.
So as an artist, I've been working in all kinds of directions. And in the last 25 years, or less maybe, I've been concentrating on the subject of root systems of different plants. But I was interested basically in the difference between the root systems, between the way they grow. I called them by the name of that root that I was interested in. I always knew that roots have to do with family, has to do with my history, but somehow I never went that way. Till Aneta approached me and she said, would you consider participating in this show? And I said, yes, I am second generation, I am an artist, but that's not what I'm doing. So Aneta said, well, what did you think about it? And I actually almost wanted to say, it doesn't fit.
it's not right. So she forced me to go that way, to actually concentrate on why am I doing all these things? What does it mean? So I said, well, if that's what I'm doing, I'm going to do the most personal piece that I've ever done in my life. And this is the root system that I made here, which I called the only one who was not murdered from his whole immediate family in the murdering, the killing fields of Auschwitz was my father. He was the only one. But since I grew up in Israel, and this was not something anybody talked about, although it was clear, and everybody, every neighbor, everywhere I went, in the youth movement, in the military, in the university, everywhere, it was there, but that was not a subject to talk about. So, Aneta, I thank you for forcing me to do it. And then she forced me to write an essay on top of that. So, I had to look into all of it. So,
hello everyone, thank you for coming. Thank you, hello, and thank you for coming. Is this better? Yes.
Please speak it to the mouth.
Yes.
Please.
This is Aneta. She's been fantastic, as you see. Take care of all the details. Anyway, this is my piece. I'll refer to it in a little bit, but for now I'll address what Aneta mentioned initially about voluntary and involuntary memory. A little while ago I did a piece, a series of works called In Memoriam. It was my tribute to the Holocaust. Both of my parents were Holocaust survivors, and the great majority of my family on both sides died. The way I started that series is one day I went to my studio and I had a certain urgency. I was kind of anxious, and I was anxious and frightened of the feelings, but I picked up a piece of scrap paper, 30 by 22, watercolors I had used before, but I wrote it, I started painting on it because that was what I needed to do, big brush strokes, abstract. It turned out to be different colors, but mostly I focused on black and red. And this was over a long time. After I would finish painting each day, I would hide that. My feeling was hiding on some drawers so that other people couldn't see it because I didn't know what I was doing. I was little bit frightened, and what I was painting was eliciting anger and rage and sadness and fear. And after doing several of these over a period of time, I realized that what I was doing was painting feelings of the Holocaust and images. Although mostly do abstract work, and there were some little stick figures. And I kept doing this, and then over time, it dawned on me that what I was painting were my parents' feelings. They, like other parents here, and traumatized people often do not speak about their experiences. So I realized that what's coming out was what I felt growing up. I showed this to my sister, and I said, "Do this mean anything to you?" And she said, "Absolutely. That's what it was. That's how I felt." So this is involuntary and voluntary memory that at the end I became aware, yes, this is what it was, but I didn't know what was coming up. After several series later, I started this series called Gracias a la Vida. My background, my parents were refugees, ended up in Mexico, and that's where my sister was born, that's where I was born, and so Spanish is my first language. Gracias a la Vida is a song that was popular in the 70s, 60s, by Violeta Parra, a Chilean singer-composer, very moving. I do too. She wrote, Gracias a la Vida is about gratitude for the different things in her life. And so I'm interested in, anyway, this song is about gratitude, about the gratitude of the different things in her life. And I've loved that song, and all of a sudden, recently, it has occurred to me that I would like to explore that. And this is the first piece, it's called Race. Thank you. Race, R-A-Y-S. Yeah, race.
I wanted to introduce my mother's family in this book. This book was, I was doing research on the Holocaust, and I was looking through, I paint people's faces, people's gestures and all that. And I ran across a picture that's in here. I'll leave this book out so you people, if you're interested.
Please louder.
Okay. No, you're reading. Yeah.
Please just look on.
Yeah. There's a picture, there's one picture that my mother had, and it's of her, her brother, her father, grandfather, and aunts. It's the only picture she had. I was looking through the internet, and on the 9th page or whatever, the picture was on the internet, was a copy of this book. And I have this book only because my brother found a printed version of it about a year ago, and he sent it to me. But that picture, and the picture was found recently, about maybe in the 60s, in a photographer's studio in Lodz, in Zunska-Bola, which was their hometown. The pictures were on glass plates, and nobody knew who these people were. This book is full of people we do not know who their names were. Nobody knew who my mother's family was, who they were. And I just keep thinking of pictures that were taken, and they're dressed up, and they're holding the little dolls, the little toys. And these pictures were meant to carry on memories to the future. And it ended up basically with me, and no one else saw it. So that's just a little bit of the beginning of one of the memories that I had. Another thing, the war ended in 1945. I was born in 1946, and we were given housing by the Germans in a home. Some people were in DP camps. We were in a house that 2 elderly women owned, and we stayed with them. We came over to the United States. We ended up in Boston and Georgetown, and then my father was a butcher. Then we finally ended up in Landon Park, Silver Spring area. And I just remember they did not talk about things, and I remember feeling different. Some people have also mentioned how they felt different. My father had the blue numbers on his arm. I know I was embarrassed about that, and I didn't want my friends to see it. And he spoke with accents, and I inherited my memory. I inherited their memories through their actions. They're bringing me up. They didn't know how to raise a child. They just lost their child. My father's mother's name was Giga. My mother's name was Giga, and I was named Giga. That's my original name, Giga Walkowitz. I was embarrassed with my name. so I'm going back right now. We moved to Langley Park. I went to school, and I just felt different and alienated from the blonde-haired other children. I found that I gravitated as friends to the Christian children. I did not have friends that were Jewish. And I think that was because I felt that the other Jewish, I felt that the Jewish American children did not know what we had gone through. And I did not get in, and I was embarrassed that I did not get in. So to this day, I still am trying to find out, in my advanced years now, I'm trying to find out who I am and why I inherited these feelings of desperateness and alienation. My paintings are back there, those two little groups of there. You'll see people in a group and then see individual people. I think of being in the camp and having friends, having no friends, having relationships, being lonely, and going on with their lives in camps. I did meet a docent at the Holocaust Museum, and I did talk to her, and she had been in the camp. And she said that in the camp she made very close relationships. The closest she had. And said if they're not we're not going to war and crimes committed, it would have been a great time in her life. And that's where I'm going towards.
Hi, my name is Chaya. My parents were Holocaust survivors. They lived in Poland. They didn't know each other. My mother was a young 4-year-old when the war started. My father, living in a different town, was 16 years old. And somehow their parents, which were my grandparents, on my mother's side, decided to escape into Russia. And that's how they lived in Russia during the war. My father, on the other hand, he was able to, I don't want to say he escaped into Russia, he was arrested by the NKVD, and they thought he was a spy, and they sent him to Siberia. My parents never really said anything to us other than that, as to their experiences during the war. Once in a while they would have they would make a remark, and it could have been something like, how can you not eat all the food on your plate? We had no food. Like my mother would say, she was happy to have a crust of bread. So to this day, for me, it's really difficult for me to throw out any food, and it may go into my refrigerator for a while and get a little moist. But my paintings are little pebbles, or it identifies with little pebbles, and each pebble would be a memory that maybe they had that they never really wanted to share with us. One of the things that I do remember my father saying is they walked a lot. They didn't have cars, they didn't have transportation, they didn't have horses or bicycles or anything. And he would walk for days, and I know that at one point he walked from Siberia back to Poland. So, that was like a memory, and that would probably be the kernel of how I was thinking about stones, and thinking about pebbles, and thinking about those are the only things left, whereas my family's gone, we're the next generation, but what will happen in the future? I don't even, I can't imagine what could happen to humanity at all. from this point forward, and that's all I can share with you.
I believe there might be some questions from the audience. I know we have a very large audience. We do have some time for questions to any of the artists here. Could we identify the names of each person? Okay, this is a very large exhibition. We have Coos Hamburger, originally from Holland, as you heard. We have Michael Steiner Borek, originally from Czech Republic near Prague, actually north of Prague, Nové Mesto nad Metují. We have Miriam Mörsel whose family also is from former Czechoslovakia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire and a bit from Poland. We have Klaidman, whose family is also from former Czechoslovakia, but the Slovak part, near Piešťany, the Bath town near Bratislava. We have Micheline Klagsbrun, whose family came originally from Poland, then to Belgium. Then her mother walked through Belgium to escape, and her father went on a boat and barely made it to London. And then we have Dalya Luttwak, whose family is also from Slovakia, in former Czechoslovakia, near the Bath town of Piešťany, and managed to escape to what was not Israel at that time, Palestine, where Dalya was born in a kibbutz in the Galilee. Then we have Margot Neuhaus, whose family is from near Krakow in Poland, primarily. And they ended up in Siberia, I believe, as well. And then they managed to escape on a boat to Mexico because they couldn't get elsewhere, where she was born. Then we have Gitla, or Trudy Babchak, as she became known in America. And Trudy's family came from your Polish town, which is called, I'm blanking now. Near Lodz. I should know better than that. I speak some Polish. Lodz, as they say in Poland. And they ended up also in parts of Russia or maybe Siberia. Correct, as well as in various camps on the way back, including in Germany for a while. Liberated from Auschwitz. And then finally we have Chaya Schapiro, whose family, as you heard, also came from Poland near Lublin. And they also ended up in Siberia or Russia, both places. And then camps along the way. And somehow all of these people ended up in the United States after all of these travails, and they're neighbors, if you will. And that's another point I wanted to underscore, that it is really, okay, the catalog is still not available in large enough numbers that you can purchase it. It will be available in the bookstore downstairs. We just received the first shipment only 2 days ago, so I'm saving those copies for the artists. But the catalog includes a brief curatorial introductory essay and 10 stories, reminiscences, essays by individual artists, so you will get 10 different perspectives on this whole topic. And there is also a little map by the elevator where we have marked with dots places associated with their itineraries. And as I comment in the essay, it is really scary to think about how these people and their families may have intersected. In other words, not only did they come from similar areas geographically, they ended up in the same camps in a couple of cases. The people who perished may have known each other, may have become friends in those camps. It's just frightening to think about all of the human connections here. And the way in which now all of these artists are working together and talking to each other through their work and leaving their imprint through this exhibition for us to see. So thank you again for coming, but please, if you have any questions. Any questions for anybody or any other information you would like to get at this point? Please go ahead.
I just wanted to ask one of the artists, Chaya Schapiro, I noticed that your art has different names.
She has a microphone. Could you speak into the mic?
I am. Can you hear me? Yeah. I wanted to ask, I noticed that your art had, each piece had a different name on it, and I was wondering how those names came about.
Okay, thanks for asking. Each piece has a name of either my grandmother, my grandfather, my two uncles, and my aunt, and then one for each of my parents. I don't want them to ever be forgotten, and the only way I can do that is by creating a piece of art. And hopefully that'll be, passed down through the generations, and at least they'll have their names. My sister and my two brothers, we were all named after my father's family who were murdered, and we have no way of knowing how that happened. There are things that are coming up in the internet, but it's very scant. And I just will never forget that we were named after them, and I just want that to go in perpetuity.
I was wondering if you could talk about the curatorial process a little bit, how you chose which pieces and which artists and making the show cohesive.
Curatorial process in this case, there were two different criteria at the same time. Obviously, the first one was the fact that many of these artists exhibited already in the first exhibition at Howard County Community College. But we added several others who they didn't know at that time. The organizers didn't know about their work, or they couldn't participate for one reason or another. So we had a group of 10 artists, Mindy, Weisel, who is not here with us, but you can see her work. The suitcase, by the way, that suitcase is a real suitcase from 1947 that a friend of Mindy's gave to her in the 70s, somebody else who escaped, because she wanted to create a suitcase to symbolize the passage of her own father after Auschwitz to America. And it is inscribed with his numbers, or scribbled with his number, because it's about scribbling as well, and erasing, and scratching, and all of that, all these marks that people leave. The point about curating is that obviously I was guided by that first criterion that all of these people shared the same background. Secondly, I was trying to make it visually coherent and create a sense of narrative of sorts here and ways in which they can complement one another. So I did make some selections along the way. I was fortunate to be working with serious artists and good artists, and artists who were also willing to listen to my advice about what should be shown here as opposed to some other works they were perhaps interested in showing. So that was the curatorial process. On the one hand, guided by aesthetic criteria conceptually as well, but also on the other hand, really wanting to give each person an opportunity to express what matters to them within this context. And that's pretty much it. Any other questions at the moment? Please.
I would like to ask a question to Margot. And I am curious, as we all are, the reason for the only real light, the only real joy that exists in this room with all the memories. How did you get this from Gracias a la Vida? Thank you, Susan. I'm as old as you are, in a way. Like all it came out, like the work I had in memoriam for the Holocaust. I had spent years painting with red and black primarily, and there were other series that followed. I don't think of my work as, I don't lead, I follow. I follow what comes up. And so I think my sense of this is that I got enough out of the Holocaust. I mean, I don't know, 5-6 years with this urgency to put stuff out. And other series came after that. They were somewhat related. I did a series called Outcry that has to do with the condition of the refugees and women and the underprivileged. So in a way it's related. And then I did a series called Of Silence, which was being in the moment. It's almost like I gradually moved away from, this feelings of the Holocaust towards the present. And after the Of Silence, this came up, Gracias a la Vida. So that's my reading of it, that I got enough out so that there's space for gratitude. Thank you for your question. Yeah, these are rays of light. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Any other questions? You lost the microphone somewhere. If you have any other questions, please. There is another microphone. Thank you so much. Please.
I have a question for anyone who would like to, who is willing to answer. This is trauma, and you're processing trauma. Does it get easier because the trauma is processed? For you personally?
It's a great question. I want to reiterate by following up on something that both Chaya said and Margot said. My name is Coos, and named after my grandfather was killed in Auschwitz. My grandmother spoke about her experiences in the war from my earliest memories until she passed away. My mother did not until our children were born. My son is sitting in the audience along with my wife. You process trauma in different ways, but for my grandmother, her lesson was learn, listen, don't let it repeat, and live life to the fullest. So for her, and passing on to me, to my mother as well, it's a life of optimism and strength and moving forward. That the Holocaust, the Nazis win if you allow them to continue to dominate your psyche. And so by being here, I think it was that we're here, by being here and by grasping the beauty of life and the vibrancy of life, that is the ode to my grandmother and to my mother and to those who could not be here. So you deal with trauma, but it doesn't mean it has to bring you down. You can rise above it, and it's critical to do. I think that's a major lesson for all of us.
These words are almost literal of the space where I was hidden underneath. But every single one of them has this mysterious light coming from a tiny window, which is an homage to the people, to the two families that risked their lives and really in great danger to save us for a whole year. And I think that made me who I am. A very positive person. I have not dwelt on the negative. My parents were like that, and it really is to honor these extraordinary human beings who did not get anything out of it, but did the right thing. They were both Catholic families, very religious, and took their Christianity the way Christianity is supposed to be. And this is an homage to these two families, to the Belitsky, one man, and to the Reka family, from tiny little villages, but they had the courage and the strength to do what should be done.
I just wanted to say that, yes, one has kind of absorbed this trauma, but there is something, I don't know if gratifying is the word, but perhaps healing, when you can actually take what has been there and do something with it. So in my case, I consider myself to a certain extent a documentarian, in that I am, in this case, transcribing words that my mother said or wrote, or I am pulling up images from photographs, family members who were murdered, and doing work that brings them forward, says their name, they're not forgotten. So there is something that's, it feels helpful. It doesn't fix it, it doesn't make it go away, but there is something concrete that can be done, and I do value that.
It's just a thought. Well, it's hardly worth standing up for. It's just a thought. But I think in terms of physical trauma, where there's then a type of growth upwards, you think of scars, or you think of growth that comes further along. And I feel like with all of us, there's this sort of creative regeneration in some way, growth that dates back to the trauma but has changed into something very different. And there's something very satisfying about being able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming again, and thank you all artists for collaborating so well with each other every week and making it possible to this exhibition. So on that note, I hope you can come back for the opening, or even better, on a quiet day, and look at the work and think about it, and maybe read some of the essays in the catalog, some of the stories that these artists have contributed